Have you ever noticed that the most interesting people in the room are often the quietest ones? We live in a digital era where almost everything is on display, from our morning coffee and birthday parties to our deepest struggles and highest achievements. It seems like the unwritten rule of modern life is simple. If you didn't post it, did it even happen? And yet, there is a group of people who remain completely unseen. You might know someone like this. Maybe you are someone like this. They have social media accounts. They scroll. They see the updates. They notice the trends. But they rarely, if ever, post anything themselves. Their profile is a ghost town, even though their life is full and vibrant. And this begs a fascinating question that hangs in the back of everyone's mind. Why? Why would someone choose to stay hidden when the entire world seems desperate to be noticed? It is easy to assume that people who don't post are just shy, boring, or perhaps introverted. But that is not the whole story. In fact, it is barely the surface. Beneath that silence, there is a complex psychology in motion. It reveals a lot about human nature, self awareness, and a subtle rebellion against a culture that is obsessed with constant visibility. Today, we are going to dive deep into the psychology of silence. We are going to uncover why the people who post the least often have the most stability, and why stepping back from the feed might be the ultimate power move in a noisy world. To understand this, we first have to redefine what silence actually is. For many, silence looks like emptiness. It looks like a lack of activity. But for the people who choose not to post, silence isn't emptiness. It is control. It is the deliberate ability to decide what the world does not have permission to see. Whether we like to admit it or not, social media has quietly reshaped how we define who we are. It rewards performance. It celebrates noise. It trains us to think that our value is linked to how many eyes are on us. But those who stay in the shadows often see the game more clearly than anyone else. They watch without needing to intrude. They think before they respond. And most importantly, they reflect before they judge. Psychologists have noticed something profound about this behavior. People who avoid posting frequently tend to score much higher on traits like self-control, introspection, and emotional autonomy. This means they are less driven by comparison and external approval. In simple terms, they are not trying to prove who they are to the internet. They are too busy trying to understand who they are in real life. And in a world overflowing with performances, that is incredibly rare. Because let's be honest with ourselves, most of what we share online isn't just communication, it is identity sculpting. It is an unconscious audition for belonging. Every caption, every carefully filtered photo, every status update whispers the same question to the audience. This is me. Do you approve? But when you stop posting, something shifts inside your brain. You begin to detach your self-worth from digital applause. You stop thinking in captions. You start experiencing moments for yourself again, instead of framing them for a camera lens. This is the quiet psychology behind many people who don't post. It's not that they dislike social media, it's that they can't locate their true selves inside of it anymore. They crave something real in a space where everything feels staged. It is not about being anti-technology or anti-social. It is about refusing to squeeze the complexity of a human life into a highlight reel. Once you realize how easily perception can be manipulated online, you start to value the things that cannot be uploaded. Things like silence, depth, imperfection, and raw truth. For some, the choice not to post comes after a period of emotional fatigue. Maybe they used to share everything. They posted the food, the travel, the relationships, until one day it stopped feeling honest. They realized that each time they posted something beautiful, they felt a subtle pressure to keep outdoing themselves. They weren't living anymore. They were performing. They were managing a brand, not a life. So, they stepped away quietly. No big announcement, no dramatic "I'm leaving" post, just a gradual fading from the feed. But here is what people often misunderstand. Not posting does not mean not feeling. It doesn't mean they don't care. It often means they care deeply about presence, about meaning, and about guarding what is sacred to them. There is a fascinating concept in psychology called psychological ownership. It describes that deep feeling that something is profoundly yours, a thought, a memory, a specific experience. The research suggests that when you post a moment, that sense of ownership dissolves just a bit. The moment stops being yours and becomes communal property. It becomes open to judgment, distortion, and even ridicule. So, the people who don't post are often protecting their sense of ownership over their life itself. They keep their moments untouched, private, and whole. This is not avoidance, it is a gentle form of freedom. Think about it for a second. When was the last time you did something truly meaningful and didn't feel the impulse to share it? When was the last time you laughed until your stomach hurt, or cried, or achieved a personal goal without immediately thinking about how to phrase it for an audience? That reflex, that urge to display, isn't natural. It is conditioned. It is the result of years of likes, shares, and dopamine loops teaching our minds to confuse validation with worth. When someone steps outside that pattern, it can look like rebellion to the rest of us. But for them, it is healing. They start rediscovering the simplicity of doing things purely for the sake of doing them. Cooking a meal without photographing it. Traveling to a new city without tagging the location. Feeling an emotion without narrating it to strangers. In that quiet space, something awakens. A form of self-awareness that doesn't need spectators to exist. However, we have to be nuanced here. Not everyone who avoids posting does it from a place of peace. Some do it from fear. Fear of judgment, rejection, or misinterpretation. Social media has intensified a subtle form of anxiety that psychologists call self-presentational pressure. This is the constant nagging sense that you are being observed even when you are alone. For many, this pressure is exhausting. They worry their words might be misread. They worry about being ignored. So, they retreat. Not because they don't want connection, but because the cost of visibility feels too heavy. They want to be seen, but they want to be seen genuinely, not superficially. Ironically, the quietest people online often have the loudest minds. They are not absent, they are overflowing. They just choose stillness over spectacle. There is a deep philosophical layer to this silence as well. In a world that is constantly shouting, "Look at me," choosing invisibility becomes a form of self-defense. It is a way of saying, "I exist beyond your perception of me." These people might scroll through others' lives, nodding, smiling, sometimes even aching with empathy, but they rarely project their own life back onto the screen because they understand something that many of us ignore. They understand that not everything you experience is meant to be witnessed. Sometimes the most transformative things, real growth, deep grief, profound change, happen quietly. They happen unposted and unseen. And when you have moved through enough of those private shifts, you realize that being unseen is not the same thing as being unimportant. It is actually the place where true identity is built, not performed. This brings us to the great paradox of our time. Social media was designed to connect us. Yet, it often leaves people feeling more isolated than ever before. When you stop posting, you stop chasing digital closeness and start rebuilding actual closeness. You begin to notice who checks on you without constant updates. You learn who remembers you without reminders. That type of connection, raw, private, and unbroadcasted, feels heavier. It feels warmer. It feels more genuine. People who don't post live inside that space. They form relationships that don't need digital proof. They find comfort in unshared moments. They let life happen without turning it into content. Part of this is also about identity stability. It is about knowing who you are, even when no one is watching. When you are comfortable in your own company, you don't need an audience to verify your value. That is not arrogance. That is calmness. And isn't it interesting? Those who rarely post often have the most compelling stories to tell. But they reserve those stories for moments when you are sitting across from them, looking them in the eye, not looking at them across a screen. Because to them, real connection is not measured in reactions or emojis. It is measured in shared silence, in eye contact, and in laughter that doesn't need to be recorded. These are people who hold entire worlds inside them. They notice constantly. They feel deeply. They understand quietly. They don't need global applause to justify their existence. They just need to live it. And maybe, in a world that is desperate to be noticed, their silence is not a weakness. It is a reflection. It is a reminder to the rest of us that not every meaningful thing needs to be shared. That sometimes, the most human thing you can do is keep something entirely for yourself. You know what is truly interesting? The longer someone stays away from the cycle of posting, the more vividly they begin to experience life. Colors seem richer, time feels slower, conversations feel deeper. It is as if stepping away from the noise makes everything real again. Because when you stop performing, you start living. There is a quiet beauty in moving through the world without needing evidence of every step. You aren't thinking about angles. You aren't thinking about lighting. You are just present, fully inside the moment, instead of hovering outside of it. And that is something social media rarely allows us to do anymore. But the psychology behind this reaches deeper than just personal preference. It is tied to how our brains process reward. Every time something we post gets attention, likes, hearts, comments, our brain releases dopamine. This is the same chemical tied to reward and addiction. With time, we begin to crave that hit. We start evaluating our own lives through the lens of, is this shareable? Now, imagine someone who steps out of that loop. Someone who intentionally breaks away from that dopamine cycle. That is not indifference. That is discipline. It takes immense self-awareness to resist something that is engineered to keep you hooked. People who don't post often have a strong internal locus of control. This means their sense of worth comes from within, not from external approval. They don't need a digital echo saying you are enough in order to believe it. Research even shows that those who take long breaks from posting or consuming social media often experience noticeable increases in emotional steadiness and life satisfaction. Because when your identity is no longer constantly reflected back at you, it becomes grounded. It becomes real. You aren't editing your life into something digestible for others. You are living it in all its messy, beautiful, raw complexity. And maybe that is the true rebellion, staying whole in a world that rewards fragments. But we must also acknowledge that online silence isn't always serenity. Sometimes it hides weariness. For many, social media was once a happy place for connection, but it turned into a place that drained them. There is a quiet emotional fatigue that comes from watching everyone's highlight reels. While you are trying to make sense of your own behind-the-scenes struggles, you start comparing yourself even when you don't intend to. You question your worth even when you logically know better. Eventually, some people step away, not from bitterness, but from self-preservation. They realize they don't owe the world a performance. They don't owe explanations for their silence. They don't owe proof of their happiness to be believed. That is one of the hidden truths of our era. We have mistaken visibility for value. We assume that to matter, we must be seen. But real meaning doesn't need witnesses. Some of the most defining moments of your life, the ones that actually shape your soul, will happen privately. No cameras, no captions, no audience. Just you and the universe. And maybe that is what the people who don't post understand better than anyone. They know that privacy isn't loneliness. It is intimacy with yourself. When you stop broadcasting every thought, you start hearing your own voice again. You reconnect with the parts of yourself that got drowned out by the noise. Your subtle desires, your unspoken fears, your inner direction. And that is something almost spiritual today. It is not withdrawing from the world. It is returning home to yourself. Of course, it is not always easy. There are moments of doubt. Moments where you wonder if silence makes you invisible. You wonder if you are falling behind while everyone else performs progress. But eventually, you notice something reassuring. Your worth doesn't vanish just because no one is watching. It stays steady and quiet, like the hum of a room after a storm passes. And maybe that is what real confidence looks like. Not the loud online declaration of self, but the calm, offline certainty of it. Some people say, if you didn't post it, it didn't happen. But the truth is, the experiences that shape you the most rarely make it online. Your internal victories, your moments of kindness, your quiet resilience, they live in memory, not media. And maybe that is enough. When psychologists talk about authentic self expression, they mention a concept called congruence. This is the alignment between who you are inside and who you show to the outside world. But in an age of filters and algorithms, that alignment constantly wavers. We begin living as a version of ourselves created for approval. So when someone chooses not to post, it may be their way of staying congruent. It is their way of maintaining that delicate connection between inner truth and outer expression. They don't need everyone to see their feelings for those feelings to be valid. They don't need to capture every sunset to remember its warmth. They live fully and they live quietly. Here is the irony. Those who live quietly often feel the world the most intensely. Because they aren't distracted by the presentation of it, they absorb details that others overlook. The way shadows shift across a wall, the breath someone takes before speaking, the faint sound of laughter in the distance. They are present. And presence is the rarest currency in a world built on attention. Sometimes that very presence makes them misunderstood. People may see them as detached, mysterious, or even cold. But if you look closer, their silence isn't emptiness. It is depth. It is the stillness that comes from no longer needing to explain yourself to be understood. There is a quiet strength in not needing everyone to know you, just a few people who truly get you. And that is what people who don't post understand. They know not every truth belongs to the crowd. Some pieces of you deserve to stay untouched by algorithms and opinions. Because the moment something becomes public, it stops being entirely yours. It becomes open to interpretation, to trends, to noise. And some moments are simply too sacred for that. So, the next time you notice someone who never posts, someone whose profile is quiet, don't assume they are hiding. Maybe they are simply living. Maybe they have found peace in the quieter corners of existence, the ones not lit by the blue glow of a screen. Maybe they are the ones who remembered what the rest of us forgot. That being unseen doesn't mean being alone. That being quiet doesn't mean being empty. That sometimes the truest expression of who you are is silence. Because in the end, we are not meant to be performances. We are meant to be people. And the people who don't post, they remind us of that with every quiet, unfiltered, beautifully invisible moment. If you are watching this and you feel that pressure to perform, take a breath. It is okay to step back. It is okay to keep things for yourself. Your life is happening right now, whether the internet sees it or not.